Good afternoon and welcome. I will now call to order the February 26, 2026 meeting of the Policy Management Committee. Before we begin, I would like to give my colleagues a moment to introduce themselves, starting with Ms. Zimmerman.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Natalie Zimmerman. I represent District 2.
Good afternoon, Julie Yang, District 3. Good to see everyone.
And I'm Brenda Wolf, District 5. Ms. Malou is on travel, so she will not be joining us today. So thank you. I'd like to take a moment to welcome our new committee member.
I'm so excited. I truly can hardly contain myself. I'm really excited to be here.
Okay, we look forward to working with you too. Next, I'd like to ask if there are any questions or concerns regarding the informational summary from the December 3rd meeting. Seeing none, we can move on. We will be reviewing public comments received on a few policies and any changes that are being recommended as a result. Specifically, we will be taking a look at policy IGS, and we're doing acronyms today, so get your books out. Emerging Technologies in Education, policy GCC, background screening, candidates for MCPS employment, contractors and volunteers, policy BFA, which is policy setting. After we complete that, we will review some technical amendments that are being offered on policy KBA, policy on public information. Finally, the committee will review an item of information on MCPS regulations which have been approved by the superintendent's office since the last meeting. With that overview, if there are no initial questions from committee members, I will ask staff to get started with our discussion on policy IGS, Emerging Technologies in Education. This is a policy that will address use of AI in schools, and I know we're all excited to hear about this. So please introduce yourself as you speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf and members of the committee. My name is Sally Davis. I'm the supervisor of policy and regulations. And as you requested, we will introduce ourselves as we speak. So can I have slide 2, please? Thank you. So this slide shows that we are at step 3 of 5 in the policy development process. So here, today, as Ms. Wolf said, we're at the 3rd stage where we review the public comments at the committee level, and you hear our recommendations for language updates, and where the action item for the committee today is to decide to move it forward to the full board for their chance to review the public comments. So just to recap, all of our members in the audience and out there in TV land, work on this policy began a year ago. And it began with in-depth meetings with stakeholder engagement groups where discussions provided the opportunity for stakeholders to raise issues that concern them with artificial intelligence. And when staff reported back to this committee in May of 2025, staff advised Policy Management Committee to strengthen the existing bones of policy IGS rather than drafting a text-specific policy. And the committee decided that IGS already provides the foundation for technology integration, and that by refining these principles, we can ensure that MCPS is prepared not just for artificial intelligence, but for any other emerging technology that follows. So an updated draft of policy IGS was reviewed by the full board this past October and distributed for public comment until January 2026. So today we're asking the committee to review the updates and move it forward if that is their decision. Next slide, please. All right, so the committee saw this slide back in May, and it shows that there are 3 policies that also address topics raised in stakeholder meetings. So policy ACA, non-discrimination, equity, and cultural proficiency does address equity and non-discrimination concerns. Policy IKA, grading and reporting, addresses grading and reporting. And there is also policy IGA, which is the behavior intervention policy. This slide also shows that there were additional themes that the team will address today. So themes like ethical use and oversight, data privacy, security of data, academic integrity, equitable access, and staff support, among others. So let me turn to Ms. Fields.
Good afternoon. Kimberly Fields, Chief Technology Officer. Next slide, please. To better understand the needs of our schools and community, we gathered meaningful stakeholder input from spring of 2025 that is contributing to the foundation of our process. We developed an inclusive approach to collect feedback, as Ms. Davis shared, from teachers, schools, administrators, community members, parents, guardians, and students, as well as others. The broad engagement allowed us to identify the concerns, the challenges, needs, and opportunities related to emerging technologies. The feedback is directly shaping the language and direction of our emerging technologies education policy. The initial data provided the information of how this could be done with a variety of considerations, with attention to data privacy, ethics, and responsible use has been the focus of most of the feedback. Next slide, please. As Ms. Davis shared, the public comment feedback was solicited for an extended period of time, from October 2025 through January 2026. We had 591 respondents. When we look at graph 1, our respondents consisted of students, parents, guardians, community members, and staff. 42% of feedback were from students. Second was our 38% were from parent and guardians of an MCPS student. When we look at graph 2, is it clear that the policy applies to integrating emerging innovations in technology into MCPS instruction and operations and is not specifically addressing any one tool? Respondents, 30% strongly agreed, 40% agreed, 17% were neutral, 11% disagreed, and 4% strongly disagreed. When we take a look at graph 3, the draft helps me to understand that board directs the superintendent to establish the procedures necessary to implement the board's principles. Respondents, 18% strongly agreed, 42% agreed, 26% were neutral, 11% disagreed, and 4% strongly disagreed. Next slide, please. We asked the following 2 questions of concerns of our survey participants. Please indicate if there is an implementation issue in the list below that concerns you the most. And speaking just solely to the top 3, the top 3 areas of concerns from respondents were authentic learning, 31%, acceptable, ethical, and responsible use, 31%, and academic dishonesty, 17.5%. Our second question, please indicate if there is a principle in the list below that concerns you the most. The top 3 areas of concerns were supervision of student use limiting or detecting academic dishonesty at 39%, procedures for selecting and approving new technologies at 26%, and staff support and training at 13%. Next slide, please. The public comment feedback form gave respondents the opportunity to provide feedback in 3 areas. For each recommendation section, common themes were identified. The themes further substantiated the need to be strategic in being responsible in AI adoption, meaning that this is truly a cross-divisional collaboration that not only impacts the Division of Technology Services, but also the Division of Teaching and Learning, as well as others. When we look at the recommendations, there was number 1, recommendations for issues to be addressed, if applicable, policies and regulations. We did reference in this section where people can find where those edits were made in the policy. Number 2, recommendations for professional learning. And 3, recommendations for guideline development. Next slide, please. We have added additional language in the policy as it relates to technology use in the reference section, such as age, grade level, cognitive development, mental health. One of the biggest items we saw related to screen time. In that particular section, we did add language as related to instructional practices shall appropriately balance the use of educational technologies with a variety of instruction methods, modalities in support of active, engaged, meaningful, and socially interactive learning. We also talk about the technology may be strategically employed as a resource to advance curricular goals, as well as talking about how technology is used within digital devices, print, and strategically selected, acquired, and distributed in that way within these sections to address the mental health, age, grade level, ethics, harassment, discrimination, and bias. Next slide, please. In reference to the theme of dishonesty, cheating, unlawful usage, student work, authentic learning, we've adjusted language as it impacts the academic dishonesty and learning. We have a section for artificial intelligence that discusses the intended use of the tools as a form to support and not replace authentic learning, teaching, but to optimize the workflow in the areas appropriate. Also, as it relates to the environmental concerns, we do have a section that references, in alignment with the board policy, ECA, sustainability, the board's commitment to mitigate any environmental impact of deploying emerging technologies. And what does that include? Making sure MCPS shall consider the longevity of hardware to reduce the accumulation of electronic waste. And we also talk about how MCPS shall encourage staff and students to consider reducing unnecessary resource use and the unnecessary consumption associated with the use of artificial intelligence. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. In reference to privacy, third-party data mining chatbots, our digital literacy and digital citizenship, vetting and approving AI tools, we recognize that data privacy is essential when evaluating digital tools and developing related policies. To effectively support students, we must ensure educators receive professional development that builds the necessary digital literacy foundation for curricular shifts. We are also enhancing our internal vetting process for online tools to include AI-specific reviews, such as conducting what we will call an algorithmic impact assessment, which allows for us to better understand how these tools are being trained. Additionally, we're looking to ensure that all digital tools are currently in use that are properly identified and remain relevant. And language has been included in those appropriate sections. Ms. Holly Van Pembroke will continue on the next slide.
Good afternoon. I'm Holly Van Pembroke, the supervisor for school libraries in MCPS. So, recommendations for professional learning. To teach and model digital literacy to students, staff must be informed and knowledgeable. Plans for professional learning are underway. This professional learning may potentially consist of a general learning level for all employees and then subsequent opportunities for learning, which could be tailored to specific roles. This approach will help MCPS level set a common understanding of terms and broad uses associated with emerging technologies, as well as provide more tailored trainings to address specific uses of emerging technologies in different roles. In addition to the trainings provided at the central level, MCPS employs a certified media specialist in 206 of our 211 sites, school sites. So media specialists are uniquely equipped to teach both students and staff about emerging technologies, as it is part of COMAR 13A.05.04, Programs for Library Media Services, and the MSDE State Standards for School Librarians. As a county, we are very well positioned to roll out trainings both centrally through our talented technology office staff, as well as at the school level by leveraging the position of the media specialist in each of our 206 school sites. Next slide, please. Okay. To continue with the recommendations for professional learning, lesson planning, differentiating instruction, and personalized learning are a few of the strengths that emerging technologies brings to the field of education. By using these tools effectively, staff can save time and boost productivity, but they must be trained on how to use tools that are safe and effective. This will be a very important piece of the professional learning experience. And I'll turn it over to Joel.
Good afternoon. Joel Smetanka, IT Supervisor in the Department of Educational Technology. Data privacy will be a key element of the MCPS district-wide professional learning plan and its guideline development. Safe, legal, and ethical use of digital information has long been part of our staff development and is evidenced by its inclusion in annual compliance training for all MCPS staff. Users need to know which tools have been vetted and are approved for use. A cross-functional team has been working to improve and update the vetting process, including criteria for evaluating AI tools or digital tools that have added AI functionality, such as chatbots. The Division of Technology Services will continue to work alongside teaching and learning and procurement to evaluate the safety and effectiveness of all digital tools. I'm going to turn it back over to Holly.
So for number 6 on the slide, age appropriateness is an important consideration for each decision made in the classroom. However, students are never too young to begin learning the basics of safe and ethical use of devices, as well as developing critical thinking skills and learning how to ask questions about what they're seeing. We provide lessons around these topics in our digital literacy and well-being curriculum for grades K through 5. Students receive a minimum of 3 lessons per year in elementary school. All lessons have foundational skills for AI literacy woven throughout, such as questioning and critical thinking. Promoting digital health, of which digital balance is a part, is also a key factor in being responsible users of technology. This is also taught through our digital literacy and well-being curriculum. Next slide, please. Okay, so for recommendations for guideline development, there are really 2 pieces to the first bullet there of academic integrity or academic dishonesty. First, we have to proactively define what acceptable use looks like for assignments and give students, and then second, we have to give students the tools to avoid academic dishonesty when completing an assignment. To address these pieces, we are researching what other districts and states have done to explicitly and proactively address how emerging technologies, such as AI, can be used in assignments. While acceptable use will differ depending on the grade, assignment, content, we aim to build the capacity of teachers across all disciplines to explicitly state when AI is allowed, how it must be credited, and in which assignments or parts of the assignments it is prohibited. The outcome of these actions will be students understanding academic integrity expectations. Transparency prevents misconduct and helps students see AI as a learning aid rather than a shortcut. For the second part, as a district, we provide the tools necessary for students to be successful and honest with their assignments, such as a citation generator tool, which includes the option to cite AI, and a plethora of online databases to encourage safe inquiry and research. The job of the media specialist is to teach information literacy, media literacy, digital citizenship as defined by COMAR, Programs for Library Media Services. So media specialists are uniquely positioned to teach both staff and students about these topics to promote a digitally safe and digitally healthy learning environment. And for the last bullet on the slide, digital balance is an important part of digital well-being. The digital literacy and well-being curriculum that is taught in each school includes lessons on the impact of technology on mental health. Parents can access this information through the MCPS webpage entitled Your Characters Count. And on this page, there are links for parents, for students, and for staff to educate themselves and find resources about these topics, including very current research. I will now turn it back over to Ms. Davis and Ms. Fields to wrap up the presentation.
So can we move forward a slide? Make sure we're on the right one. Okay. So just to recall, the action requested today is to consider the draft, consider the recommendations we're suggesting, and then move this content forward to the full board for their review on April 16th. And tentative for final action is April 30th. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Fields.
All right. So I'm going to be talking about policy implementation components. So collaborative communication strategy, including the plan. The various internal stakeholder groups are currently collaborating, from teaching and learning, procurement, legal services, human resources, just to name a few, as this cannot happen in a siloed environment, and this does not just impact the Division of Technology Services. Even if a person has a small part, we need to understand the impact during this process and how best to communicate internally and externally. Comprehensive review and update of product vetting processes, data privacy and security, equitable access, and curriculum relevance. Provide a list of approved online digital and AI tools. Develop an internal tracking system for digital tool evaluation as well. When it comes to designing professional development, digital literacy, and instructional support, we are planning for professional development to be in person, virtual, and in our professional development platform, PDO. It is critical to establish, again, that digital literacy baseline for all. Ongoing collaboration to identify best practices and develop guidelines to better assist schools in the development of a potential AI regulation. We want to build the readiness and capacity that will be needed. It will be critical to understand adoption, shaping it, and using it responsibly. It is a tool that will still have the human in the loop. Monitoring Maryland State Department of Education K-12 AI guidelines. MSDE is communicating that guidance for K-12 policy regulation will be forthcoming, which may impact how we end up moving forward as well. Next slide, please. Before we begin discussions, I do want to give a special thank you to the teams in the Division of Technology and Teaching and Learning that have been diligently researching and participating in AI certificate programs to become more informed and be subject matter experts. Thoughtful discussion has occurred through different lenses and how we can be strategic in our approach with emerging technology tools and artificial intelligence. And with that, we're ready for discussion. So we'd like to open it up.
Thank you. That was a lot of information. And I did review a lot of it. I have a couple of questions, just general questions. You mentioned looking at what other states are doing. Did you do that in terms of developing the policy? You did do that. So some of the states have had policy a little longer. Were you able to find out any challenges they had to incorporate any of that into what you submitted?
I'll kick off and then see if folks want to add to it. What we found in looking at what other states had developed was quite a lot of it was what we in our district would call guidelines. You should do this. Best practices would be to do that. Mm-hmm. And we just kept seeing that. And then we tried to develop specific mandates, and this conversation is so timely because information that was discussed at the state board level on Tuesday even said specifically that the recommendations from school leaders, there were 5 themes, and it said provide flexible guidance rather than mandates. Second one was prioritize professional learning, create collaborative networks to share practices, integrate AI with existing priorities. So we really felt like we were right in line with where the field was going. The field just keeps saying, state your priorities, state what's important to you, and then keep developing really be flexible in your development of guidelines so that you can stay current.
Well, I just have another sort of general comment, and that is there are a lot of different regulations, or not regulations, different policies cited in this policy. But have we made changes to those policies? Is there a cross-reference that's specific to AI? Because I guess what I'm concerned about is that we not get the blowback that we did on grading and reporting when that was released. So we want everybody to be very clear that this cross-reference is here and it's specific as to AI, because there was a lot of concern from the students about this. I'm just wondering, as a general practice, can we bring all the regulations in and cross-reference them all at once?
So,
and not regulations, policies. Sorry.
Yeah, Ms. Wolf, I think maybe we should take that as a follow-up item.
Could you talk a little louder?
I think maybe we need to take that as a follow-up item for our ability to show you where it all fits, because there's been a lot of redevelopment, for example, of the grading regulation. So that regulation has been updated more recently than the policy, and the policy stated principles, again, that when we looked at it in the development process, it was in line with where we were going, but we'd be happy to take that as an action item for follow-up.
I just think for me personally, it would be helpful to be able to look at that policy and know specifically how, when you cite it here, it's being used over in grading and reporting, let's say.
In the slide you saw in May, and MCPS TV, could you pull up the IGS slideshow again and go to, I think it's the third slide? Yes. Would you mind doing that? Because what we did at that time was we did cross-reference it. We looked, section here, section here, section here, section here. What you'll notice in columns 4, 5, and 6, we call out references in each of those policies that have relevant statements to the themes that came up in the discussion groups. So we'd be happy to revisit those and bring them back for discussion when we come back.
Yeah, it's just a thought. I was curious about that. And I'm going to move on, but I just had one other thought, and then I won't have any more questions. Sustainability, ECA, you've got it cited in here. But why wouldn't you just put it in the sustainability policy and then cross-reference it here?
Yeah, I'm gonna kick this off, and then I'm gonna maybe turn to Holly. This was an interest of concern for a lot of students,
I saw that.
and it did not. We wanted to honor their concerns,
Okay.
and I would say that the students may be ahead of a lot of other people developing guidance in raising the concern. So we did want to honor their comments.
That's good enough for me. I was just curious because it looked like the whole section could be moved over to sustainability. Julie?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'm excited about this policy. Yeah, I never thought I will be one person that's excited about policy, but here I am, very excited about policy. Remind me, in our past discussion, did we say, hey, we're going to fix this, instead of AI policy, we're going to have updated emerging education technology policy, and then then we say we're going to have regulations or guidelines. And are we still sticking with that plan, and what's the timeline?
So I'm going to start off, and then I'm going to let Kim fill in where I miss it. Okay. We are going to take the approach, frankly, the work on guidelines and professional development, as you heard on the last slide, is already happening, right? Okay. So the work with Mr. Smetanka and the work that Ms. Van Palmbrook is doing, that's happening now.
Okay.
It takes time.
Okay.
It takes time. It takes time to roll it out.
Okay.
That work in our recommendation is that precede any further development of governance documents, that we should really be putting that out, seeing how it goes, refining it before we take the next step.
So in terms when we put out guidelines or regulation, or however you want to call it, and different level of, I guess, implementation, there are two areas I want us to look at. And you can tell me whether we have already planned it to happen in either one of these, or that might need to be somewhere else further down the road. Because if you look at the public comment summaries, shows that 31.6% respondents identify authentic learning as their top concern, and 75.5% identify academic dishonesty as their top concern, right, when we talk about this. So are we I know in section C1 and C2, we have some overarching principles. However, we have not addressed, if we are talking about honesty, if we are talking about authentic learning, we have not identified anything about maybe enforcement model. How do we check, right, the honesty or authentic learning? How we do, how the AI detection reliability, we haven't identified that. And also, at what grade level, right? Different grade level, like disclosure, right? I'm an elementary school kid, I use something, and I'm a middle school kid, versus I'm a high school kid. At what level of disclosure we would like the students to have? And then, and if they were dishonest, what was some consequence or framework of that guide? I don't want to say disciplinary, that, consequent framework.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah,
because
right.
that's what I was
Right.
observing too.
Right.
That the students are going to be looking to see where is that academic dishonesty.
Right,
And it's
right.
not specific in here to me.
So,
I was
yeah,
trying to look for that
right,
cross-reference.
Right. So
Yeah.
that might be a guideline or
That was
regulation,
the
because
problem I was having.
what happened here is, as a policy, I understand, we
Yeah.
acknowledge the concern, but we haven't addressed the mechanics of how to deal with it. So I would like to see that in a regulation or guideline. And when can we see that? I'm a little bit pushy right here. Okay, but really, truly, this, if we develop policy, we need to,
And I think if there's an overlap in policy, it needs to be specific in here.
Okay, that's number one. Number two, I think from the public comments pie chart, 12.8% people citing data privacy. As I'm looking at Ms. Field, I know she's all over this. She's very aware of this as their top concern. Okay, so now I do believe this policy trying to address it in like C3, section C3 broadly, try to address it. But what I have not seen, so I'm wondering whether a regulation or a guideline will come out is like topic like, data retention limits. How long do we retain people's data? Audit language. How often do we audit whether these data companies really stick to what they say they would do? And, and then, and is there a difference between staff data handling versus student data handling? Are we thinking about that? Or does that matter? Or I think it matters, staff and student, right? So okay, and then also, we also know those people transmit data to other AI system, if we use AI, whatever, and they might transmit it to somewhere else. So how do we handle that? What's our policy on that? Or not policy, regulation or guideline? Or when we cut a deal with someone, how do we write those contracts and things like that? So it is referenced here in this policy, but there are a lot of real life implications that we have to think about that I would like to see be more explicit somewhere else in the system. That's all my comment.
Thank you. Ms. Zimmerman.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to finish writing my furious, copious notes. So my thoughts are, as we're gaining this feedback and we're looking at these emerging technologies, I noticed that there's not necessarily a specific mention of our educators as well as our students as being part of the team that is like evaluating, being part of this formal vetting process, and being part of that team to introduce these emerging technologies. I'm thinking specifically of, things that emerge and that I would see in my classroom. I can think of the example that now on Google Slides, there's an AI beautify option. And how fun is that for all my kindergarten friends? It has a butterfly on it, so click on, ooh. My point is that we might miss some of these elements in our day-to-day because we're not in the thick of it sometimes. And I think specifically to students as well, I can think of a student who I really adore, and I'm going to shout him out because it's going to make his day. And Krishna, I really appreciate your insights on all the technology. And he does watch meetings, so I know that he's going to tell me about it later. But my point to this is that he's telling me, he's like, well, you know, Miss Natalie, if you go on Bing, then you can get around this thing and that thing. Students know the workarounds. Students know some of these other elements. Students are doing these things at home. My thought is that because our students are so smart, they're so engaged, that if we have them as part of this team that is helping us to introduce new technology into our learning space, that it's only going to make our rollout even better. So that's something that I really like to see in the policy, especially as so many staff members and students gave us feedback here. It tells us that they really want to be involved. I also, related to that, would love to see some additional mention to diversity in who is involved in this. We know AI comes with bias. I know this isn't specifically about AI, but any technology that's going to be emerging here forward should have the same careful consideration when it comes to bias as well. I also, to kind of shift gears a little bit into part of what Ms. Yang was talking about was making me think to this as well when she was talking about auditing and revisiting. I suppose at some point our emerging technologies maybe aren't emerging anymore, but they're still really important technology. And so much of our feedback talked about technology use and Chromebooks and screen time and all of that. What's our process once something is maybe no longer emerging, but perhaps a different technological aspect? Do we have a process in which we evaluate that technology again in the future?
So, no, and thank you for, thank you, Ms. Zimmerman, for that. So yes, right now, we know on our online digital tools, we are currently under an evaluation process with that. It's a minimum of about 787. We have put together an entire workbook of all the tools, but also looking at the terms, looking at the privacy. Is AI within these tools? Is it free? Is it paid? What do we now need to do if it's tied to curriculum? Is it even relevant anymore? And that's why we have really been working so hard internally to really bring apart that cross collaboration with teaching and learning, because we wouldn't want to sunset something or block something that is actually meaningful and relevant as long as we're not introducing a security risk.
Got it.
And so we are doing exactly that because the auditing and the vetting process is so critical. And then I want to go back to what you had mentioned before about the bias. And we do mention that within the IGS policy. And we do understand that based on the tool, yes, there can be bias based on how the development of that tool is. And so one of the things that's currently out in the industry, what we call an algorithmic impact tool, is a tool that allows for us to question with the vendor, especially if they're on contract with us. Let us know how you did what you did with this tool. Did you train it? Did you test it? Did it produce bias? What does that look like, right? To make sure, is that going to fit in our environment? And this is the first of its kind in the district because we didn't have anything like this. And that's why we've really been working hard to really be thoughtful and take into consideration the safety of not just the teachers and employees, but also the students as well. So yes, we are definitely on the same page with that in addition to the data privacy, because we wouldn't just want our data and our students' data. And we do hold that in very, very high regards for data privacy going across the board, student, staff, anyone within the district.
Great. I guess my follow-up to that is you're talking about this real mountain of work kind of set before you, is that what can, not only this committee, but the whole board, what can we do to support some of that work too?
It's a loaded question.
You'll
But
think
I
about
love it,
that.
but I love it. Let me go back to the team to be able to provide that additional feedback to you based on what your question is. And I truly appreciate the ask. Just being able to offer that support because the lift is huge and we are a lean but mighty team.
Mrs.
And again,
Zimmerman,
I
we
would
do
say-
have 3 positions for the for the team, right, in the new budget?
We are adding additional positions, and we have reconstituted and abolished as well, especially to make sure we really think through data privacy. Because currently, right now, we do not have a position that is stated for data privacy to be able to help us understand FERPA, COPPA, SIPA. We do utilize our legal services, but it's going to be important to have that additional position and that skill set within the district.
Excellent. Thank you.
And thank you for also the student engagement part, because I did take note to that, to figure out where we can bring them in at.
She's gonna add him to the
exceed
team.
that feedback as well.
Please do. He'd be so thrilled. I'll connect you with my buddy.
Let's all go offline. But this is why I think it's so important that we cross-reference, because the tool that you just referred to, which I wasn't aware that we were using or had, it sounds like an excellent tool, but it needs to be specific somewhere in procurement. I don't know whether it's policies, regulations, practices, whatever. We need more specificity around looking at these things for bias.
And thank you for making that statement, because we are working with procurement as well as legal services when it comes to the tools that are being brought, as well as what we may need to be putting in the contracts. So this is definitely a team collaborative effort, and what we have to do and how we're moving forward to be able to address such a fast-paced technology tool.
Julie.
So this is really, I just want to express my thanks for, legal team, technology, library, curriculum. A lot of your work is behind the scene, but it really is how to transform our policy into, to operationalize it. So I want to offer a word of thanks and appreciation to all of you for the great work you do. Thank you.
So if there are no further questions, I need a motion to forward policy IGS to the full board for final action and adoption.
So moved.
Do we need second? Second.
Let me see. It says receive a motion and a second.
Okay,
Yep.
we did it.
All in favor, raise your hand. And that is unanimous.
All right.
Next up, I will ask staff to begin to review the comments received on policy GCC, our background screening policy.
All right.
Please introduce yourselves.
Okay, thank you. Joining me now at the table, and she's coming forward, is Dr. McCall. She is the acting chief of the Division of Human Resources and Talent Management. And I'm going to, let's see, what did you want me to start with? No, I think I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Sally, and good afternoon, everyone. We are here to review the feedback received from the public related to policy GCC, background screening of MCPS employees, candidates for MCPS employment, contractors, and volunteers. If we could go to the next slide, please. I love how Ms. Zimmerman talked about beautifying certain slides, and I actually took advantage of that with this picture here to demonstrate the number of respondents to the feedback survey. We had a total of 135 respondents, and you could see the breakdown of the various groups and the percentages associated with it. We also wanted to highlight that more than 90% of the respondents ranked the MCPS employee group as the most important to them as compared to the other groups, and they're listed on this slide. We'll go to the next slide, please. Thank you. 3 themes emerged from the survey data, and they are here: barriers and costs associated with volunteering, frequency or re-fingerprinting, and training related to child abuse and neglect compliance. The next slide, please. Feedback from respondents highlighted that fingerprinting costs of $62.50 may be a financial hardship for some parents or guardians, inadvertently preventing some families from volunteering and engaging in their child's school activities. And we have some key quotes here on the slide, as well as our response to the public. On the next slide, you'll find a very familiar slide. This is from a presentation previously in the fall to provide some context here. This shows the framework that we presented to the board last September. It details our safety requirements for volunteers based on the level of access to our students. The first column requires no required compliance measures. And the middle column details volunteer activities that do in fact require CAN training or child abuse and neglect training. And the final column in red shows requirements that are needed for volunteers specifically with unsupervised access to students. This is where the fingerprinting costs occur and where our hardship exceptions come into play to remove barriers for parent engagement. On the next slide, the safety of our students is our top priority, and we ensure that volunteers who have unsupervised access to our students are background screened. But the cost of fingerprinting shouldn't be a barrier for family participation. We reduced fees for volunteers involved in outdoor ed, as you can see on the slide, from $62.50 to $25.20. And we want to emphasize that our case-by-case hardship review is available to ensure that every parent has the opportunity to be involved in their child's educational experience. Next slide, please. Respondents also lifted up the concern about the frequency of re-fingerprinting. To clarify, the fingerprinting process is a one and done since staff are enrolled in the RAP-BAC program. And this program provides continuous monitoring and notification if a staff member's background status changes, such as an arrest, a charge, or a conviction. Because we have this continuous monitoring in place, we do not require re-fingerprinting of our staff. Next slide, please. Lastly, we wanted to provide clarity on the role of the volunteer. Regardless of the screening level, all volunteers are mandated reporters. If a volunteer suspects abuse or neglect, the process is clearly outlined in MCPS regulation JHCRA. And they should report any instances to CPS and notify the school principal. Our CAN training or child abuse and neglect training provides our volunteers with the knowledge they need to uphold this important responsibility. Next slide, please. This slide shows where we are along the timeline. We are at step 3 of our 5-step process of policy development. We have moved past the initial drafting and the public comment period. Our focus right now is analyzing the community feedback. A final presentation and official adoption of the amended policy is scheduled to occur this April. Next slide, please. And so, our key takeaways. The primary feedback we received centered on the cost of fingerprinting, and our strategy is to encourage family engagement by offering a case-by-case exception process for those experiencing financial hardship related to those costs. Also, our current regulations already manage the frequency of background checks and training, and so no substantive changes have been made to the draft policy, since they are already addressed in terms of re-fingerprinting frequency as well as the mandate for CAN training. And last slide, please. Oh, there was one more before that, but and with that, I'll hand it back to you for questions and discussion.
How would I know that there's a hardship exception? I kept looking for it in here because that was one of the concerns.
That is an excellent question. I do think we need to do a better job at communicating that we are offering that. At this point in time, if someone is experiencing a hardship, they would speak with the background screening staff when they go in for fingerprinting. And so I agree that perhaps we could do a better job at placing it in forms, communicating that more often and frequently to ensure that folks are aware that that is an opportunity.
But why couldn't we put it somewhere in this policy? Because if I looked online and I saw $60 and I didn't have $60, I'm not even going to come in for you to tell me that.
Yeah.
We will certainly take that back. And I also would like for us to take a look at the regulation as well. I wonder if, in fact, we lifted it up in that regulation, and if so, we can cross-reference. But I received that feedback.
But even if it's in a regulation, I may not know it's a regulation. If I looked online and just saw $60, I need to know that you're offering exceptions. You don't have to respond now, Sal. It was just...
I just want to tell you, because this is one where our cross-referencing is like, we were on it. So there are two regulations that were updated in December. One was the school visitors, which we needed to update the language on how people are screened as they come in the door and how that technology works. And the other was the volunteer reg. And in that reg, we have a statement that requires schools, when they're notifying volunteers, to put in that notification of the availability, the opportunity to volunteer, also proactively communicate the opportunity for financial assistance. So that was a step we took in December.
Thank you. Julie?
First, congratulations. I think the slides are beautiful.
They were very
Very pleasing.
easy to understand.
Easy to understand, bigger fonts. I like it. And also, you do stay on top of the concerns. You actually address two of my concerns. I will associate myself with Ms. Wolf's comment that if we actually do give, hardship considerations, whether it's on a sliding scale or whatever, we automatically qualify people who are in free or reduced lunch, whatever. I think we need to be a little bit explicit, because once it takes courage to even walk to that door. If I don't know that's available to me beforehand, I won't go there. All right. My second question is, you did address the saying that the staff do not need to be re-fingerprint afterwards because we are in the RAT program. Great, that's an important message to the world to hear. Now, if there's something happen, how soon are we being notified by, for say, a new arrest or something like that? How soon are we?
That's an excellent question, Ms. Yang, and I don't want to provide misinformation, so I would have to go back and double check that. But my knowledge and my understanding is that it is immediately notification to the district.
Okay, I think, it's wonderful, it's constantly monitoring. I just want to make sure the communication is also constant and timely. Okay. One last question, it says, the draft mentioned that commensurate with responsibility and levels of access, meaning when they are, how they do these monitoring, background checks. So tell me, in real practice, for example, if I am a one-time classroom speaker on government service or whatever, versus a future chaperone who go to the Natural History Museum and might be independently with the kids for a few minutes or whatever. What's the difference in terms of our background fingerprinting or whatever requirement?
If we could just go back to the slide, I'm not sure which number it is. It has the table that's green, yellow, and red. Yeah, this one. This one here. Okay, so this details, so the first column here, you have supervised access to students, so you don't need any training or fingerprinting, no background screening.
So I'm a guest speaker, will fall under like a guest reader kind of thing. So I don't need any fingerprint or background.
So you would be arranging with the school coming in.
Okay.
And the middle column here, so depending if you are student teaching, so therefore you might have unsupervised or you might have supervised access to students.
So I'm going to the Natural History Museum. I actually is a supervised field trip chaperone. So I do need to have the child abuse and neglect training.
Correct.
Okay. all right,
Yes.
Okay.
And then finally, the last column, if you have unsupervised visits. And so a great example is outdoor education,
Okay.
right? And so therefore, you would not only have to have the training, you would also have to have the background screening that consists of fingerprinting and CPS check.
So the reason I want to go through this, because I want to be clear that this is consistent in practice in our schools. One of the things I have heard from the parent community is they are going to supervise a field trip, but people say you need to go get fingerprint or background checked. See, I think there's some variances out there. So I think we need to do a better job communicating to all schools so that, highest level of security is always good. It's always good. But sometimes that create barriers for participation. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. If there are no further questions, I need a motion to move policy GCC to the full board.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Okay, next step, I will ask staff to begin the review of policy BFA, policy setting. Are they leaving you all by yourself, Sally? Look, our million viewers have left.
These are the exciting stuff. People are missing out.
I agree. Why do you think I was so excited to be here?
So glad we still have the Zimmer.
Yeah, I know, right?
All right. Okay. So if we can move forward a slide. You've seen this, you know where we are. We are following the same chronology as the other two. If we can move to the next slide. Thank you. So for policy BFA policy setting, we received 225 responses, of which the majority were from parents and guardians of current students. We asked what kinds of policy setting issues they were most interested in. And next slide, please. Okay. There was a high degree of interest about who is on the board policy management committee and how the board decides which policies to review each year. So let me make sure I'm on the right slide. So let's move to the next slide, please. We are recommending updates to the policy in response to comments about community engagement and implementation and monitoring. So I'm going to move you through the draft at this point. So if we can take out the actual draft and move to pages 3 through 6. So I'd like to especially direct your attention to page 4, line 139. We reworked this section substantially in response to comments. So these clarify from the old language of the policy what is meant by lie on the table for 21 days. So when the board recommends the minimum public comment period of 21 days from the existing policy, staff will publish the draft policy in a feedback survey and then notify the public through all the communication channels we have available, such as what we're currently using is Thursday Things to Know, Canvas. We put a notice in the principal memoranda that goes out every week to encourage them to put it in their newsletters and to talk about it with their school communities. And for those individuals who have signed up to receive emails or text, it goes out to them. So I would like to move next to line 154. That the board has the option to extend the minimum public comment period. And this does allow staff the time to engage in more time and resource-intensive community engagement practices. And when the board revised policy ABA community engagement, it fully detailed a variety of purposes of engagement regarding board decision-making and a variety of techniques. So we did not repeat that text here, but that is a process that we are all well aware of. Next update is line 172. The existing policy specifically said that policies affecting students shall involve students in the policy review process. And our comments from staff were, me too. So we added a reference that the policies affecting staff should involve staff in the engagement process. The next clarifications I'd like to update, lines 204 on the following page, I believe it's page 6. All right, this is something we would like to get very clear with the board what your intent is here. Our standing practice when we receive comments is to give you in the materials the person's name. We do not give them the email. We do not give you back their email, but we will give you their name. And this is very consistent, well, this is very parallel to public testimony at board meetings. Public testimony is not anonymous. Public comments are not anonymous. So that's the first issue that we wanted to clarify. Then at line 204, we also, this is just a clarification, but it is our standing practice for redacting comments that identify issues specific to individual students or staff. Public comments are not the proper channel for raising personnel concerns or seeking redress for specific student concerns. So all those comments that you read, we went through every one and checked to make sure where we needed to maybe redact the specific name of somebody who a person was raising. We are sometimes surprised at the information about their own children that people will put in comments. So we do take that very seriously, that we do not want to compromise those identities. All right, so those are the main changes to the policy that we made in response to comments. The next slide, please. Okay, and again, you've seen this before, but we are on the same trajectory as the other two policies. And then next slide, please. All right, so I'm ready for your comments.
I just have one question, and it's on page 5, and it says, student and staff representatives shall be involved in the revision or development of major board policies affecting them. Well, don't these policies always affect them? I mean, so the way it's written, it would seem like they could be excluded at some point. It would seem to me, even if the policy didn't affect them, a student and somebody on the staff should be represented at whatever you're doing. So I was hoping you could just work on that language when you bring it back.
Yeah.
And maybe you've got an argument for this.
Well, I'd appreciate a little more direction of what you want, but I can give you an example. For example,
Okay.
When we revised, I believe it was last year, Ms. Yang, you will remember, and I can certainly check, when we did the policy GAA, it had a lot to do with the culture of work. And so before we wrote the policy, we did a lot of conversations with staff groups to get out the themes that they wanted captured. So that was very specific, I think, and we took that very seriously. And then, of course, at the next round of engagement, everybody gets the chance to comment. But, I mean, you're right, it's both and, right? We make everything available to everybody. Mm-hmm. And then there are some that we wanted to specifically target our initial work with some focus groups. The other one I can think of is when we did policy IKB homework. Everybody's got an opinion on homework, yes, but you may remember all the work we did reaching out and in focus groups with kids, middle school and high school. I don't think we did elementary.
So then you're making a distinction between development and comment. the comment period. Okay, I can understand that. Thank you. I'm not seeing any further lights, so I need a motion to forward policy BFA to the full Board of Education for final action.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand, and that is unanimous. Thank you. Next up, we will review technical amendments that are being offered on policy KBA, Policy on Public Information. I'll ask staff to begin. Just me and you, just the three of us and you. And now we have one person.
Okay, there is a state regulation on board procedure. And in December, the State Board of Education put out for proposed comments some language to update those procedures. When we looked at it, we noticed that we are fully in line with it. But there was a statement in the proposed language that said, you'll have a policy on that. So I wanted to walk you through our thinking about that and why we just see this as a technical amendment. We're already doing this, and it is required in law. So while it may be new practice for some school districts to offer the opportunity for open sessions, we do that. You do that. There will be an opportunity in the open sessions to hear public testimony from members of the public. You do that already. The board already does that. The board already publishes its process and procedures for how to register to speak and all the other procedures that go along with being a speaker at a board meeting. The board is fully compliant with the requirements. Your board governance manual codifies the procedure. Your board website publishes the procedures and all the forms and contact information that individuals need. However, for the part of that revised language in the state Code of Maryland Regulations about a policy statement, we thought it would be helpful, and I'm going to take you to page 2 of KBA. And I do want to point out the statement that precedes it, just so that you understand why we put it in this policy. So line 52 starts, page 2, the business of the school district is conducted in compliance with public information and open meetings laws. We already say that in this policy. We thought it might be helpful, just so that we're fully compliant, to say the board's business meetings and regular sessions shall permit public testimony, and rules and procedures for public testimony shall be published in the Board of Education handbook and the board's website. So we have it in policy, and here's where the public goes.
Okay, thank you.
I have no further comments on that.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, I need a motion to forward policy KBA to the full board for final action. Because what is being proposed are technical amendments, board policy permits us to forego public comment and move straight to final adoption on this policy. Can I get a motion?
Motion to move the policy, I'm sorry,
To the full board.
to the full board.
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand, and that is unanimous. Now, on to our final agenda item. Are you the final person? Do any members of the committee have any questions regarding the item of information on regulations approved by the superintendent's office since the committee's last meeting? Seeing none, this concludes the Policy Management Committee's business for today. I move that the committee adjourn.
Second. Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. Want to thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
And we are adjourned.